It helps a lot.
Yes. So we are now recording, and I'm going to introduce Reg Henry. We're so pleased to have him. He has spoken at Double Nickels before, and been one of our, I would say, most humorous and pleasant speakers. So Reg was the former editor of the Monterey Herald, a nationally syndicated columnist. This is his first novel, Love in the Late Edition. But there is another book. Somebody held it up. Cynthia has a copy. The Wry World of Reg Henry.
I have it myself.
There it is. The Wry World of Reg Henry.
And younger.
And this is a collection of columns that he's written.
Right.
So he was an opinion piece writer.
Right.
And with that, I'm going to just turn it over to you, Reg.
Well, thank you very much, Linda. Thank you. And once again, you've given me more praise than I can possibly handle because I can't live up to this, but I'll try my best, okay? And you did promise American subtitles. I don't see any, because I have an accent. It's going to be hard to. Okay. Well, thank you very much it's great. And particularly there's this Good Shepherd's my home church and it does make a brief cameo appearance in the book under another name. There are several things like that in the book. So thank you for inspiring me to that. I, as you say, when I left the Post-Gazette in Pittsburgh, I did write this book, The Wry World of Reg Henry, which was also a blog that I wrote at that time. And it was a collection of columns. And I always wanted to write a novel. If you're a writer, you want to write. So, and that was the Everest. What I didn't really count on or anticipate that it would be, Everest is really high. It's really hard to climb. And it's the same with the novel. When I wrote my column, it was 750 words a week. This novel is 84,000. So it's like a sprinter being asked to run a marathon. It doesn't really work too well. So I had to it was really hard. It's really hard to write a novel. First of all, you've got to keep it all in your head and you've got to keep the characters straight. I still wake up in the middle of the night thinking that I hope I didn't misspell, the names didn't change. There was a bit of that. I had to actually go back and change people's names to make them consistent. And the first thing about the novel you should know is that it's not me being written about, although I did support my character with all sorts of autobiographical details. And in doing so, convinced my wife, for one, that I was Alistair, which was a problem because if I was Alistair, then Linda was Priscilla, and she got killed off in the first chapter, which was a little hard to explain to everybody who knows and loves her, which is sort of the whole world. So, I went by the old adage, write what you know. What do I know? I know my life. I know it better than anybody. And I know about being old now because I was 73 this month. So all these things are meant to buttress the fiction. And it is a novel after all. And so it is confusing to people sometimes who just think, I have to explain to people that really I don't live in a retirement home. It is about, I don't know how many people have read it, but it's about a guy who goes to a retirement home against his better judgment. And like me, he was originally from Australia. And like me, he worked in the newspaper industry and he doesn't really want to go, as I wouldn't really want to go. And so he goes and his wife dies the very first night. I hope this is a spoiler alert, I guess. But it gets better, I hope. And he flounders around and he can't, find a purpose in his life anymore because he really loved his wife. And so he goes through various manifestations and finally he does find something to do, and he finds it in his old occupation of journalism. He becomes the editor of the local newsletter, and from that he builds a life. He meets somebody and very unexpectedly becomes involved with that person, and then it ascends into plateaus of lightness and sweetness. And
if you're trying to get a hold of me, I'm listening to Reg's talk. Bye.
I didn't hear that. Was that there?
So that was somebody not on mute who was talking. So if I could just interrupt for 1 minute, I'm going to ask all of our, people to put yourselves on mute until it's time for questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, I've never had the crowd shut up, but it's just quite as usually they're throwing things. Anyway, I had various false starts. When I came, it was one of my aims to write this book in retirement, but it took me probably about 2 years to start. And I started writing a book about, of all things, a blind football player who regains his sight. So he inherits the gift of the blind and to anticipate things and to know his situation even if he can't see. But when he's sighted, he retains that gift. So he becomes a great corner. He plays the corners in the National Football League, and he can anticipate where the ball is going. Well, that it was a good idea, but it never went anywhere. I had another idea that I got the idea of, we as a society, we've got away from revering the elderly. I thought, well, I was at least back on the track of writing something about being old, and it was about a man who they persuade to run for office and would bring the wisdom of the ages. Well, then we had a new change of thing, and everybody old was doing stupid things, and that idea exploded. So it was back to square one. And it so happened that I was in this little group of old guys who went to movies. And the one rule was they would be movies of no socially redeeming value. That was the one. Sometimes mistakes were made, and we'd actually go to movies that were pretty good, and there would be much muttering, oh, that was too darn good for us. We like car chases, and, lots of people dead, Anyway, one of the guys lived in a retirement community, and he started, I won't say which one, because I don't particularly want to get you to think it's about that one. The one I wrote about, I hope, is very generic. And he started writing, telling me these wonderful stories about what people were up to. I never have lived in a retirement community, but I've made speeches there on occasions in my life as an editor, both here in my previous life and back in Pittsburgh. So I sort of know the terrain, and I know people who live there. And then this guy was feeding me these great stories, and I thought, what? Nobody's ever written about this. The closest anybody had came to was like the Most Exotic Marigold Hotel, I think that's what it's called, which was a funny book, but it didn't really have a purpose. It was just funny. There was this hotel in India where English people would go and get up to funny things. And, I wanted the book to be funny, but I also wanted it to be sad and have a meaning to it. I mean, why would you ever read a book, particularly an obscure book like me, unless you had a good reason to? Well, and if you haven't read the book, I hope you'll read it, because I think it is funny. It is, but at the same time, it is sad. It starts off sad. And there's death all around, and it's about a person who reinvents their life after a tragedy. And it's also really an ode to the newspaper business too, which has stained me for a long time. And at the end of the day, it's a love story. So it's like 3 levels. And so that's why, I got thinking along this, and it was very hard. The name of the book changed. The first one I was toying with something like Golden Oldies, I think, but Golden Oldies is it's a cliche. There are a lot of things called Golden Oldies, so I had a new name. So I thought, Last Hurrah for the Good Old Days, which I rather liked that, but nobody could pronounce, they didn't know whether it was hooray or hurrah. So that went the way of all flesh. So now I thought, well, how about it? I want to get the newspaper thing. I want to, do something else. What was it called? I've even forgotten now. Oh yes, it wasn't The Love in the Last Edition. That was the last thing. That was, it was called Headlines of the Heart. That's what it was called, which I thought was a pretty good thing. But when I went to the publisher who finally helped me, he said, no. Why don't you go with Love in the Last Edition? That really makes the point. And I think he was right, so I think it was better than Headlines of the Heart. So it's gone through all these manifestations. So I also should point out that while, everybody writes sort of what they know, and a lot of the characters are composites of people I have met. But Linda, the leading lady in this is Linda McDonald, which is awfully like Linda McConnell, I just realized just today. So but I want to stipulate for the record that as far as I know, Linda does not have a tattoo on her inner thigh, nor did she date bikers at any stage in her career. So that we should say that. I think it's important. The Linda I came up with, there is Linda influenced, Linda, our Linda, Pastor Linda influenced me to this extent. That is, I've never met a Linda I haven't liked. It's funny, you do associate names with people that you like or you don't like. Actually, less than you don't like, because I don't have anything against somebody called Philip, and he's the main, Philip Jones is the main sort of bad guy in the novel, but I have no prejudices against anyone called Jones or Philip. But I certainly, I'm in the pro-Linda faction. So, but it wasn't really Linda. So Linda, I hope you're not disappointed about that, so that you didn't make it. And there's various friends of mine who've made it in some way, or they're composites of it. But there are some people that are just, purely made up, but I know they exist. Like Romeo Rawlings, the great lover of the thing. I know sort of people like that, but I can't, it's not one person. And nor is it one person around here, because somebody in Pennsylvania wrote to me and said, I know that guy. He's in a retirement home in Pennsylvania. So, anybody who accuses me of, at the Manor or Del Mesa, Carmel or anything, no, that guy doesn't live there. He lives in Pennsylvania, although I didn't meet him. And microphone Mike, there's always somebody who likes to speak at great length. No, my whole professional life was full of those people. The rock and roll person, I've never actually met that person, but that's somewhat of a cliche. And that was one of my worries, that some of these characters would be sort of cliches, but I tried, even if they were, to give them a twist and make them something unusual. Harness the power of the cliche without really making people realize that they are to some extent. So there's no real people in there, although they come close, and particularly the bad guy. I knew somebody like that long ago, and but they'll never know it's them. Thank goodness. One of my concerns about writing something that's sort of light and dark was that I was afraid there were two things I was afraid. As soon as I wrote it, the coronavirus came. And where did coronavirus have a terrible effect? It had it in nursing homes and things. And the place I wrote about wasn't the sort of place really affected. Like the places around here, the upmarket ones, they didn't lose hundreds of people, but some of them did in the country. And I thought that was a reason why, I couldn't get it done. It would be the timing was all wrong, but I was wrong about that, because it's basically, from what I've heard from the reactions to the book, they find it very inspiring. So they don't make that connection, which I'm very glad about. And people who have suffered, this is another thing I worried about, people who have suffered a tragedy. Also, I was very afraid that I would rip scabs of somebody grieving, but that didn't seem to happen at all. And actually, I'd like to read some of the letters. What I did was get messages from, when I retired, all sorts of people sent me letters, and I wrote back to them 5 years later and said, I did say in my last column that I was going to write a novel, and here it is. And would you be interested in purchasing it? And they said, yeah. So I got a lot of feedback from those people. And I'd just like to read a few of these. I have finished reading your book and I enjoyed it immensely. It is the kind of feel-good book that I like to read now, a getaway from the turbulent times in life that I now live. And that's the other thing. They sort of see it as an antidote to the terrible times we've had. It took me a while to read it because I only read it after going to bed. The beginning chapter of your book hit rather close to home, however, as my wife, Mary, died after a long illness on September 15th. And oh no, and I read on, we had been married for 69 years, and now there's a big hole in my life where she used to be. Your book did not dwell on Alistair's loss of Susan, however, and instead focused on his efforts to get on with things. I liked that and enjoyed very much the interesting cast of characters you invented for your book. So, even the people who agree, I was extremely gratified by that response. And here's another response. This is a real Pittsburgh response. Dear Mr. Henry, finished the book last night after the Steelers game. And, and he too, this guy also had I will note that the subject matter was too close to the bone, since much of the story resembles a major part of my existence in the near past. We lived in a community with an unusual mix of quads and single family homes, et cetera, et cetera. And yet he went on to like the book and recommend it to others. So it was good. So anyway, and this one too was actually somebody that I knew as a docent who I knew was a widower. And I was he said, I want to read your book. You know, I said, I have to warn you that it's about somebody who's lost their wife. And he said, I still want to read it. So, okay. So I got it back. I truly enjoyed reading your book. I thought it was very well written, quite busy over the Christmas holidays. So I ended up reading it over the past couple of days. I have to admit, parts of your novel did conjure up some sad memories for me. However, like Alistair, I had a wonderful wife for 43 years, which seems to be a rarity these days. And then he left this little poignant message that, who knows, perhaps I'll meet a Linda one day, which I thought was very, very sweet. And all of this, you know, went some way to alleviate fears that I had, that it would be, you know, it seemed to bring joy to even the grieved. And I'm sure somebody's an exception. One thing I learned in the newspaper industry, you know, you don't, there's no such thing as universal acclaim. There's always somebody who'll take it the wrong way and criticize you. I mean, you know, it just happens, and I'm bracing for it. It hasn't yet, though, but maybe that's just a function that's not very well known yet, and all the malcontents are, you know, are just waiting for me. But so, what else can I say? I think I've covered most of it. Linda, I'd be happy to open up for questions if
that would be wonderful. And no, so I'm just going to invite people to unmute. Particularly if you have a question, unmute yourselves. And because I don't know that Reg or I know how to really look at hand raising. If you could just speak up, I think let's just do that. Is that okay, Reg?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, if people just speak up.
Okay, so Reg, this is Spence, and I just love how you start every chapter with a song.
Yes.
The songs relate to my generation. I know all of the artists. Okay, we got Simon and Garfunkel. We got Little Richard. We got Flat and Scruggs, the banjo pickers from 1931.
You have to be an old reader to get that one, I think.
Yeah, and so I note that there is no hardcore gangster rap, which I thought was good.
Yes, funny that, isn't it?
Yeah.
I came upon that device because it occurs to me as you look back on certain periods in your life, you do associate them with songs. And any book that was surfing a wave of nostalgia to some extent was, you know, that struck me as something good to do. And I just kept the little excerpts tiny, like an advertisement for the thing. So I don't think there's any copyright problems. You know, I just quoted them. And, you know, I think it was a good idea. I think it's a good idea. One thing I wanted to say is when I first wrote the book, I gave it to a select group of readers, and the very first people I had they said, this is a great book. They said, I don't know about that, but they said, but don't start off with her dying in the first chapter. That's a real downer. That's a terrible idea. And I acted upon that and rigged it so that I wrote a whole thing. It never really came together. And at the end, I got some advice from an agent who nevertheless didn't want the book. That's a whole nother story. Getting these things published is just, and he said, you know, you really ought to do that. And so I did. And I'm glad I did, because I think it worked. What the people who first criticized it didn't quite understand was, I think they were shocked. They thought it was Priscilla, for one thing. You know, they knew her. And so they were particularly shocked. But you don't know the person who's died in the book, so you can't be, so that you haven't made a connection. It's not like the other death in the book, Gavin, who dies. You're not as shocked as you might be, and it's soon clear that he's going to rise above this. So anyway, that's a beyond
Okay.
this. Yeah.
Well, Reg, that device puts you into some very distinguished company. James Agee did it. Charles Dickens did it.
Yep. That's right. Yeah, I'm glad I took the advice.
So, Reg, I also loved the little song beginnings. Did you know, like, how I was just thinking, how did you pick? Because they fit the chapters so well. I mean, are you a real like music aficionado or?
No, I couldn't carry a tune in a suitcase, as they say. But you know, they have this invention called the internet, and you can put a word search and say the thing that you're sort of looking to, you know, songs about sorrow, grief, you know, etc., etc. I don't think they all fit perfectly, but they don't have to.
Pretty good.
They're just sort of markers of it. It's a reminder these people are old too,
Right.
as if you could ever forget.
Reg, this is Lee.
Yes,
Just
Lee.
a quick question. Where could we possibly get a book of Love in the Late Edition?
Oh, well, outside the church. I'm going to be there on Friday with Debbie McFarland, I trust, from 10 to 12. You could also go down to River, and by the way, that's going to be sort of a fundraiser for the church too. The books are $15, but I'll give $6 to the church. So I'll take home $9 to recoup my debts and feed my family and all that stuff. But so that's a sort of a charity too, I guess. But the $6 will go to the church, and we have tons of them. So you come down and get 2 or 3, you know, and make the church rich. Yes, dream on. But I'll be there, and I'll sign. If you have already bought a book, of course I'd sign it. While I, just as a side, I want to acknowledge Sharon Randall, who I see there, who is much more famous than I am. She's, thank you, who had an international, for a time we were both in the same stable of syndicated columnists, I think, Sharon, and I can't remember which one. I was in 3 or 4 of them. But Sharon she goes back way back to the time of the Monterey Herald. And the one good thing I did in my life was actually, you know, suggest she write a column. And
Yes.
she did. And it was so popular, much more popular than anything I have ever written.
I blame you entirely.
Yes, for all your fame and fortune. And you have another novel coming out, Sharon. So plug it here, please, for being so good to come here.
No, I want to ask you a question.
Okay.
What are you going to write next?
I don't think it's going to be a return to this retirement community. I've been there and I've done that. And but I can tell you, because I'm the creator, right, of this little world, they all survived COVID. Everything's fine. So that's, you know, it's not going to be, if I did return, it wouldn't be a sad story. I like my stories. I've always liked my stories. The best columns I ever wrote were a mixture of sadness and laughter. And I wanted to bring that to the book. I think, in my sort of naive way, that that's where art resides, just where laughter meets tears. And if you just skate that down the middle, the work has a special, if you put people in a different, you know, they don't know whether to laugh or cry. I think you've done something special. And I wanted that thing in the book. And I think there is a bit of that. I lost all sense at the end of the day whether it was funny or not. You get so close to the characters. I have no idea whether people say it was funny.
It was funny.
As far as I'm concerned, it wasn't funny enough. So my answer to roundabout answer to your question is, Sharon, I would love to write another book, and I have an idea, but you know, to say it would immediately make it a puff of wind that would just blow away into something, because, you know. And maybe I'll meet another old guy going to the movies and he'll tell me some other thing, you know, or somebody else will come. And, but no, I have, first of all, I got to get this one, you know, displayed more and sold more. So, but I do intend to write one more. I think I got one more in me after that. Who knows?
Okay, here's another question.
Yeah.
How is writing the novel different from writing a news story, which I know you've done those, but also from writing a column? How are those kinds of writings different for you?
Well, one is the length of the project. You're with it. Where I always like writing columns and things in the newspaper that I could start in the morning and finish in the evening. Well, it was 3 or 4 years of evenings, and days, and just the size of the thing, it's the difference between washing a dog and washing an elephant, I think,
Reg, would you give us the word counts again, please?
84,000 words in the novel, 750 words in my column. So it's like 100 columns, and they were hard enough to write. And I am not any natural writer or anything like that. I have met in all my years of journalism, the natural writers, I can count them, and Sharon, you're one of them, but I can count them on the fingers of one hand. And I was never like that. I always felt that if people were reading it, if they were really perceptive, they'd see the sweat glistening on the work, and it would put them off. It's all extremely hard work, like a bricklayer, putting one brick on the other, except they're words, and then making sure it's all tight and fits, and it makes it's a huge task to get your mind around, particularly in the later years when the old mind can hardly recall what happened yesterday, to remember what, Linda did in chapter 13 when you're at chapter 39. It's hard. It's very, very hard.
Reg,
Yeah.
did you know where the story was going, or were you letting the characters reveal as you went along?
I really knew that it was going to be a happy ending. I know it's unpopular, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to do it. And maybe I was driven by the temper of the times. We really need a happy ending. So I knew it was going to a happy ending, but one of the joys of writing really is you don't know. Well, you're quite right, Anne. You don't know where you're going. You're on this magical mystery tour, and one thing suggests another. And some of this stuff just came to me.
Yeah.
Like the rock and roll guy. I never had a plan for him. He just arrived one day. Just as it does in the book, yeah.
That's cool.
That's what fiction writers often say. The character, it kind of takes on a life completely of its own, and the author is following the character rather than the other way around.
Yeah, that's what I found my experience to be. I mean, I knew the general direction in which it was going, because it wasn't going to be a tragedy,
But Reg, I found the book to be totally enjoyable. It's one of the few pieces of nonfiction I've read in recent years that was almost lacking in violence and sex. I wondered if you had to restrain yourself in order to accomplish that.
I've heard of this sex thing you talk of, but in my later years, so much slips my memory. But there is a very discreet sex scene, One of the early people that read it was a young woman in Australia, another Alison, my daughter's Alison, and we used to call her Aussie Al, and she stayed with us for 6 months, so she knew us very well. And when it was first written, she said, "I love the book, but God, that sex scene was disgusting. Can't you dial it back a bit?"
Well, you did have a violence, a food fight too. So
yeah,
it's not totally.
That never happened anywhere, but I can tell you that one of the retirement homes in this area did have a big dispute about dressing for dinner. That much came from my friend who went up to the movies with. But of course they didn't have a food fight. That was me being led by the characters. They were going to do something unruly, and what better than a food fight? Yeah. So
Reg,
there is my daughter Alison right there.
Right.
Yeah, hi, Alison. If you see Alison Gilpin, that's and the unfortunately named critter who's really named Christopher, and that's in my book of columns too.
Anyway, Reg,
yes.
Linda is looking forward to coming to buy your book. So when I'm done, tell us the time again to come to church. But
10 a.m. Friday. Thank you,
Go ahead.
Jim. Friday at the church, outside the church, from 10 a.m. to noon.
Okay.
You know.
All right. My question is for those of us that never sit long enough to read a book, but I do listen to a lot of books in my car. Is there any plan to put it on Audible or a similar book read? And you have a wonderful voice, so I'd encourage you to have it as a book read by the author.
Well, thank you. And I am available to do this, but unfortunately, it has to meet a level of popularity that would justify such an expenditure, I suppose. Yes, but I'm not sure how beautiful my voice is. I think my daughter Alison will agree that Australian accents, it's like, you know, the vowels clashing together like breaking furniture, I often think. So I'm not sure how beautiful it is. There is one worse. South African is terrible, but Australia is not very far behind. But so many other people speak English better than.
Reg, having spent so much time in this country, I would imagine your Australian friends think that you sound very American.
They do. But that only lasts a day or two, and then I'm speaking like this. G'day, how you doing? How you doing? Etc. But when I first arrive, yes, they do. They think I'm a total American, you know. And it's sad because I used to know all this great slang. Well, it's all changed. I speak an antique tongue now, you know. And they don't know what I'm talking about. When I say, oh, he shot through like the Bondi tram, well, there are no trams to Bondi anymore. It means just to move very fast, you know, leave very quickly. Shot through like the Bondi tram. Well, and they look at me blankly. It's such a sadness. Well, compared to things in the world, it's not such a sadness, but it is sad.
Well,
it's sad to me.
Reg, if we try and use 60s slang from the US here, nobody understands us either.
That's right.
That's why I wanted the American subtitles for today, you know, just so everybody would understand.
But you know, it's interesting.
Linda's let me down on that one.
I find it interesting that the phrase, you sound like a broken record, is still understood, but nobody plays records anymore.
Yeah, that's right. Well, actually, my son does. There is this little thing in the youth that they have gone back to having records.
Oh yeah.
They say it,
yeah. Vinyl is back. It's back.
Yeah, it's back. Everything's back.
It's trucking it.
Yeah.
Reg?
Yes.
I have a question, Ed P.O.
Yes.
It's kind of personal.
Oh.
I hear you talking about 73 and things slipping from your mind and aging. And of course, the book with the nursing home.
Right.
What is your personal feeling at 73 on your own personal life?
I've been younger, Ed. That much is clear. But it's been a good life, full of adventure and great friends and wonderful family. That would be you, Alison, and Jimmy, your brother, and Priscilla, who's not dead. You know, I've enjoyed my life in the newspaper business. That's why I wanted to write a paean to the news, you know, an ode to the newspaper business in the book. I think it's great. And I will observe that when people read newspapers every day, they weren't half as stupid as they are today. But maybe it's a coincidence.
Not at all. We're getting our news from the 24-hour cycle rather than from respectable.
I know.
As you know.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to remind people that, you know, of course, newspapers are not perfect, but they had standards. And if you made a mistake, they corrected them. You know, who corrects anything on talk radio? I mean, nothing. You know, and I've made my share of mistakes, goodness knows. So, what else have we got? Have I left out anything?
Well, I, for one, love that you're going to work on another one.
Yeah.
Right.
And I hope that it doesn't take you 3 or 4 years, but may your energy like carry you through.
Right.
To the finish of that one.
Right. I should say that what is the bookstore in Pacific Grove? That they also stock the book. It's not just the one in the Crossroads. And the Star Market in Salinas. If you're in the Star Market in Salinas, you're a man of the people.
Yeah. What don't they carry?
Well, there is a little section you go through the door called Local Authors. So,
That's awesome.
please buy it often. The guy there was extremely helpful.
Do you
before
miss
you
the,
just-
do you miss the routine of writing every day, or were you writing every day?
No, I would have dry spells. to tell you the
Okay.
truth. Yeah, it's very hard. As I said, it's very hard to write every day. But maybe
Yeah.
Sharon did it better than I did. But I would go and I would like furiously, I tried to keep, because I thought maybe, just maybe, the readership will be a bit older than usual, given the topic. So I kept the actual chapters are not very much. They're no more than 2,000 words. It's perfect reading before you go to bed, so you could read 2,000 words in 10 minutes, 5 minutes. And, but there's 43 of them or 42 of them or whatever it is. So there's a lot, but you can, yes, Kathleen.
I think the bookstore in Pacific Grove is the Bookworks.
That's
Yeah.
it.
Give
That is
them a
it.
plug.
Yeah.
And then my question for you is, did you change your opinion of retirement communities as you did this kind of research?
No, it's not for me, frankly. But I might change my tune when I've forgotten even more than I've forgotten now, and am more feeble than I am now. Maybe it's a very good thing, and I didn't want to write anything negative about I think there is a place for them. It's nice if you get the upmarket ones, which they're very nice places. I don't think I wrote a book that's hostile to retirement communities at all. On the contrary, the people are what they are. It is a community. And one of the gratifying things is that although I don't live there, people who do found it very authentic, which, it was a leap of fiction, but at least I seem to have got the feel of it right. Some of it you could sort of, I'm sorry, my little grandson is running around making noises. Yeah. Sorry, I've lost the thread there. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, good.
I want to make sure are there any other questions?
Yes, I have a suggestion, Reg, for your next book.
Right.
Could you write something about how to watch cricket and enjoy it?
Oh, well, it's funny. I am a big cricket follower, which makes me very unusual. And I was one of the founders of the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. You think the Cricket Association, at which we had a cricket club that was older than the Pittsburgh Pirates. It's amazing. And I love cricket. And my wife says, "Oh, it's just watching the grass grow." It's fun to watch the grass grow, is all I can say. It's fascinating study in botany, watching the grass grow. And it's beautiful because nothing happens for a long time, and you're not forever up and around and watching things. So I do love cricket, and I could explain it to you. Ed, is it who asked the question? If we were sit down and we were having a leisurely afternoon.
Well,
Yeah.
well, if she has a little time on her hand, I'll be more than happy to let her go.
So, any other questions?
Are you running out of time? I could read you one of my old columns.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
All right.
And Lee's going to let us know what our February speaker is. And I just want to say thank you so much for
Right.
doing
But
this.
I'm doing this not just to show off this book,
Yes.
but please buy this one often too. But because it does hit some of the same themes. Again, I said I like things that are. I think my writing, when it was at my best, was both sad and funny at the same time. And this one, I'm reading this sort of in memory of Alison there, who is Alison Gilpin, which you can see. This is when she left for college, and it's called The Road to College Runs Backward. And I don't know if you remember, but it's probably a long time. This is something that COVID doesn't do, but you go along to these colleges and the person who's giving the tour walks backwards because they've got the group in front of them and they're walking backwards, right? And it struck me as sort of a metaphor for life. So this was in 1998, only a few years, all across America. Excuse me?
There is a lot of ambient noise, including me. I'm going to suggest
can you keep the ambient noise down? Thank you. She's making all sorts of things. All right. This is not long. All across America, they are on the road with reference books, with concerned expressions. They make their pilgrimages. They are parents and their senior high school children, and they are looking at colleges. many, many colleges. At the end of these trips, they find that all the colleges have begun to blend into one great generic university. The students of the class of '99, happily clueless to begin with, occasionally wakened from their teen torpor to pronounce favorably upon one college or another, using such well-known academic criteria as the tour guides being studly, cool-looking dudes or not. Their parents, of course, would not know what is cool if they were standing on an iceberg. Parents, directed instinctually to be role models of squareness, are incapable of interpreting what young people like. All they know is that when they look at a likely college, they see a giant $sign with ivy on it. So the whole enterprise is a sort of a magical mystery tour for young people and their parents at a time when both parties would rather be at the beach. But at least everybody is together as a family, mostly cooped up in the car while traveling between schools and grouching at each other. In some optimistic circles, this is called quality time. As it happens, the Henry family spent part of last week interspersed between vacations and visited several colleges in New England with their daughter. That would be Allison, who's in the frame. Why not Pittsburgh, you say? Many excellent colleges. I'll go on this. Okay, well, as they say, there's a college out there for every student. All you have to do is to find it amid the thicket of college recruitment mailings, etc. In a simpler time, I imagine that a fond father would just call you up his old alma mater and fix things up with a minimum of fuss. I say, chaps, young Allison will be coming up next year. Just make sure she gets a good room on the quadrangle, will you? Actually, it is probably just as well that things are more democratic now. For example, I myself only graduated from the University of Hard Knocks, and we go to an institution that gives you out degrees of concussion, you are got nobody to call. The Ides do an odd thing. They walk backward as they speak. This makes sense because they can then face the crowd as they give their commentary. And on your left, we see the student lounge where we all goof off when we are supposed to be in class. At that time, you can almost read the thought balloons rising above the cloud of visitors. All the high school seniors are thinking fat, fat, and all their parents are thinking phooey. It's actually quite frightening. It is my experience the guide is crucial to a student's decision. The college you attend can mean what career you will follow, where you may live one day, perhaps even whom you will marry. And the whole train of events can depend on whether some college kid walking backward on a particular day shows nerdy tendencies, and so on. And you know, I write another one in this book about actually the sad day when they leave, which is the one I actually meant to read, but didn't by mistake. But that we'll quit on that unhappy note. But please read, when Sharon's book comes out, I want to be the first to read it. It's really good. And thank you so much for the opportunity. I'll be there on Friday to sign books if you have them already. And if you don't, I'd be happy to sell you one. Only cash or checks, alas, because I'm elderly and I can't deal with a credit card machine. So there, like it or lump it, but mostly like it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Reg.
Thank you.
That's great.
And if I just want to put in a really tiny plug for this book. It is very, very good. I've loaned mine out to several people now.
Great. Thank you.
Lee, what do we have coming up in February?
Well, before I get to our speaker in February, I would like to acknowledge again Sharon Randall, who was kind enough to sign her book, Bird Baths and Paper Cranes, during a halftime basketball game where Alisal was at Monterey High School. And I think that Alisal squeaked it out at the end after Monterey came back very strong. Found out that she also has Lee in her name, if I remember correctly. So Bird Baths and Paper Cranes, published in 2001. And then just recently, The World and Then Some, a novel. And perhaps we can get Sharon to talk to our monthly forum at some time in the future. We can make this a writer's group. Oh, my word. Our speaker in February is Al Scott. One of the institutions we have here in the Monterey Bay area is the Naval Postgraduate School. And Al is the director of the International Graduate Students Program at the Naval Postgraduate School. And he's going to be retiring by the end of February. So we thought we would get a quick peek at a program that has not only enhanced the lives of some of the graduate students from other countries who have been here, but has also benefited us in the Monterey Bay Area. I know a couple of officers from other navies who studied at the Naval Postgraduate School, returned to their own countries, served their time, and have now returned to the Monterey Bay Area to have their own businesses. We also have several people in the church who have taught at the Naval Postgraduate School. And for those of us who remember Conchita Harris and her husband, Scott, made a big impact on our youth programs at Good Shepherd. He was at the Naval Postgraduate School. So next month will be Al Scott and the International Graduate Students Program at the Naval Postgraduate School.
Thank you. And that'll be February 10th at noon. Again, thank you so much, Reg. And come on out to the church on Friday between 10 and noon to get your signed copy. Is there anything else, Reg? Any parting words for us?
Thank you so much for not throwing figurative boots at me, you know.
Thank you, Reg.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Reg. Fantastic.
Thank you, Lee. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye, Reg.
Bye.
Bye, Sharon and Allison and all the rest. Thank you.
Enjoy Point Lobos this afternoon.
Yeah, I think I might. Thanks.